Start by saying how important it is that we recognize that the work of scientists that work for the people of Canada is extremely important. The information that they produce, the studies that they conduct, the research they produce, and the results that they come up with are extremely important. Canadian taxpayers pay for this research. It's important research that's being done, all levels of inquiry, and it's something that Canadians should have access to. Whether in my area, of course, my experience, my critic area is Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So I talk to scientists that are looking at lobsters and for example, and the impact of warming temperatures on the lobsters and how they're migrating, when they molt, what it means to their spawning areas, with how close salmon pen farms are to them, where they are in relation to various outflows. Mr. Speaker, this is all extremely important information. By the way, I will be splitting my time, Mr. Speaker, with my colleague, the wonderful MP from Louis Hébert, and looking forward to hear what he has to say about this important issue. So, again, lobsters, salmon. There's so much work that needs to be done on the impact of climate change, for example, on not only marine life, but on the ice on the north, the impact that those things have on various cultures, various communities, it's extremely important information, and it needs to be done, I would suggest to you, in partnership with Canadians, in partnership with universities, in partnership with private sector scientists, but there needs to be a strong public component, and that Canadians have the right to have access to that information. I can't tell you how many times I've been at meetings, I've been at conferences where I've heard from people doing research. I've heard from scientists who have said that their request to speak to a group on their particular research was declined, that they've received media interviews or whatever because people have found out about their work and were interested in it because it was interest to the community in which front, or in the case of lobster, to the Atlantic, all the Atlantic provinces, but they were denied that opportunity by their political masters, Mr. Speaker, and in most cases, with all public servants that are under the control of this federal government, there is a very, very strenuous, rigorous protocol that all public servants need to follow before this government will give them permission. It's interesting. They talk about getting rid of red tape. They talk about making things more efficient and streamlining the activity and the work that public servants do in providing services, and whether that be information or whether that be handling employment insurance claims, and yet they encumber the processes to such a degree because of their fear of information going astray, or their desire to control the message at all times and at all levels, Mr. Speaker, is ironic beyond belief. But I also wanted to take the opportunity in this discussion about the muzzling of scientists to talk about how it is. I sat here and listened to a couple of government members, recite all kinds of facts and figures about evidence of how this government is in fact supporting scientists and allowing scientists to communicate. But the reality is that since this government came to power in 2011 for sure, and certainly before that, and if truth be known, this all started back when the Liberals in power, but they've been cutting funding to science programs. They've been cutting programs themselves in the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, for example. Their budget's been cut upwards of $1 billion over the last 4 years, and a great deal of that has had to do with scientists. I mean, there's a figure that my colleagues have been talking about how 4,000 scientists have been let go by this government. You know, we heard a story last week about a gentleman in Halifax, a scientist for DFO, Steve Campana, who does world-class research, and he was afraid, like a lot of his colleagues, to speak out until he retired. And once he retired, he shared his feelings about how this government is controlling his work and the work of his colleagues, and that not only are some of the waters becoming toxic, but more importantly, the environment in which these people work, Mr. Speaker, is becoming toxic. And so, you know, you're seeing these senior scientists, research scientists, and Department of Fisheries and Oceans and other departments, they can't wait to retire. And if they could afford it, they would retire sooner. Some of them are leaving and going out to the private sector because they just can't take it anymore. They just can't take it. And I've on the other end of the employment scale, Mr. Speaker, I've visited a number of departments, universities across this country that are extremely concerned with the lack of support for postdoctoral work in sciences and in my experience, again, in the whole area of marine science, where PhD students are doing important research. Masters and PhD students are doing important research, scientific work in areas that we need to know. What's the impact of increasing temperature? What's the impact of the changing composition, chemical composition of the ocean, Mr. Speaker? What's the impact on the marine life, on the biodiversity of our coasts, of our oceans, as a result of the increase in ocean acidification, for example, which is a serious problem as a result of the carbon dioxide emissions that are being held by the oceans, and they're not, the volumes are getting so large that it's affecting the chemical composition of the ocean, and that's having an impact on marine life, whether it be crustaceans or other things. And we need to know what that impact is. We need that research to be done, and we need it to be done by scientists. And when you see the research that is being done at our universities, and those PhD students are not able to get funding for postdoc work here, and so they're taking those brilliant minds and they're going to other countries. They're going to Nordic countries, or they're going to Europe, or they're going to the United States to continue to do that work. Mr. Speaker, you know, we've funded that, we've supported that research. They've made an incredible contribution, and we just simply let them go. That's what's been happening under this government, Mr. Speaker. That's the problem, and it's a combination of muzzling. It's a lack of support. I mean, you know, we've got a list of programs that have been cut by this government since 2011, and it certainly goes beyond that. That is truly. I said DFO has been cut by $1 billion. Environment Canada has been cut. The Libraries and Archives Canada, Department of Fisheries and Oceans libraries have been cut, Mr. Speaker, the National Research Council, and on it goes. The problem is that we need to start respecting science and researchers and the role that the public sector, that this government has in making sure that that work gets done. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister of State for FedDev.
Actually, I want to thank my colleague, it's great to hear him speak. Sometimes he does get off on the facts that are not actually there. But one thing he did talk about was support for postdocs, and I'm sure he is aware that there is now more support for things like internships and mentorships and apprenticeships and all these different things in Canada than ever before in the history of the nation. I'm sure he's also aware that when a scientist applies for funding, of course other scientists decide whether that science and that research is valid enough for funding. The government doesn't do that. But when a scientist applies for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to do research, they can also apply for the equipment to do that research. They can apply for support staff, like postdocs, to do their research. They can even apply for the hydro that operates the laboratory. That's how much money is available from this government. In fact, I want to ask the member if he will now support, since he claims to support postdocs, this federal government's budget, because in this budget, Canada Foundation for Innovation is receiving $1.33 billion additional dollars over 6 years. That's exactly the money that will support the postdocs and what the member is complaining about. So the solution is clear. Vote for the budget, yes or no.
The honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it was this was the case earlier when government members arrived, and this is the case with any criticism that is brought forward against this government, that they completely deny it and they come up with their own facts and figures in order to try to confuse the matter. But when you talk to scientists, when you talk to the researchers, when you talk to the universities, not in front of the minister, because they don't want to jeopardize the little bit of money that they do get, the little bit of support, but when you get them away, Mr. Speaker, remember what we're talking about, muzzling, when you get them away where they can talk openly, what they are telling us is the fact that this government is failing to provide the kind of support for those young learners, for those young scientists, to be able to go forward and do and get the research, get the support for the research that needs to be done in our communities and for our country, and to be able to share that information with Canadians. Let me just add, if I may, Mr. Speaker, in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, is the internationally known Bedford Institute of Oceanography. And recently, the government granted $3.5 million. You know what that was for? That was for the answer to the previous question about the Bedford Institute of Oceanography was that the government allocated $3.5 million. I said thank you. But it's important to know that had nothing to do with science or research. It had to do with plugging the leaks in the windows and the doors and repairing the roofs.